Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, anxiety, emotion regulation, how to support people, especially kids and teens, but adults too. Everything we talk about is relevant for adults as well, how to manage those big emotions. Very excited today. Have another special guest. We're going to be talking all about mindfulness, Claudio Barrientos. Claudio was raised in Spain and Connecticut. He's an avid traveler with an endless curiosity of people, culture, food, philosophy, and psychology. He has an undergraduate degree in philosophy and theology from University of San Francisco and a master's degree in social work from the University of Texas, San Antonio. And he is working as a licensed master social worker. As a therapist, Claudio, his approach is informed by both his personal practice of mindfulness, meditation, and his desire to make mindfulness relatable to anyone seeking relief from the daily stressors of life. I have all of his other information in our show notes, so be sure to check that out if you want to reach out to him and check out his work and ask him any questions. But like I said, we're going to be talking all about mindfulness today. Hope you enjoy. Well, thank you so much, Claudio, for joining me today. I am very appreciative to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Caroline. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking about mindfulness and kiddos and
I am as
emotions.
well.
I
Yes, it's
know.
everything that I talk about. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. I guess first and foremost, I'm a mindfulness-based therapist. So for the last 12, 13 years before I became a therapist, I was a mindfulness instructor. And only in 2020 did I decide to go back to graduate school and get my master's in clinical social work. And the purpose for that was that I really wanted to incorporate so much of the mindfulness instructions that I was offering in corporate settings or in clinical settings. I wanted to really combine that with clinical approach. So when I graduated in May of 2022, so just very recently, I took my licensing exam and I got my license. The very first thing that you have to do is fill out that Psychology Today profile
Yeah,
and
yeah.
write up like who you are and like your approach and all this. And I kept coming back to my original purpose for going to graduate school, which was incorporating mindfulness in everything that I do in a clinical approach. So I decided to go with mindfulness-based therapist because I think that really points to the framework that I'm using when I work with clients, whether they be children, adolescents, or adults. It's begins and ends with this framework of mindfulness.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm doing now. That's part of my job. And then the other part at the Austin Mindfulness Center is teaching workshops, just psychoeducational programs, for the masses.
Mhm. Okay, that sounds great. And I'm going to get to that mindfulness piece and how we can incorporate that because that's a big piece of the work that I do. But I'm really interested in your journey. How did you get to this interest of mindfulness?
That's the journey it's always a very personal one for all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that I graduated from my undergrad in 1999 from University of San Francisco, and I studied philosophy and theology. So very pragmatic and very practical stuff, right? For like contemporary American society, not at all. My dad was very confused about that right there. Um, and so was my mom. But I think that kind of pointed to something that I was very curious about, which was like, how is it that I can live a meaningful life? And my response to that right after college was to go into the film industry. So there you go. I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to produce films, and I moved out there and I moved to LA and worked at a below the line agency. So it was I my big foray into the film industry was being an agent, working my way up in the agency that I worked at right there. And my mentor, the president of the agency, was this incredible human being. that took me under his wing and taught me so many precious things about negotiations and managing people, which I still carry today. It's unbelievable how much he taught me in therapy. I'm saying he wasn't a therapist, obviously, he
No,
was an
no.
agent,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like certain principles are timeless. And this very special man offered me the job that I was waiting for, the 3.5 years into that position. And that was the day that I left him, the day that I was supposed to start that big job, get my own office. I was like, I really had a moment of existential crisis, or, or existential, just like questioning, like, what is my life going to be like? And I looked at my peers, and it was, on one hand, a beautiful life. You're working with very creative folks in a very creative industry, but on the other hand, it was a very stressful life, and one that was filled with a lot of, there were some vices, let's just say that.
Mm.
And I saw myself going down a path which I didn't know whether, going back to like college and living a meaningful life. I don't think that that was going to be a meaningful life for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I left that industry. My mentor, that person, ended up taking his life, which was a huge, huge moment for me, because that was like the final like shove that I needed to say, get out of the film industry and pursue something meaningful. And that's when I moved to New Mexico to study with James Duval and Michelle Duval, the Mindful Center, people that I had known for 25 years. And I did a 2.5 year teacher training program with them, helped them grow the business as well, because I had that marketing and business development
Yeah.
background. And after 2.5 years, with the blessing of Michelle and Jim, I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and started my own mindful center called the Mindful Center Knoxville.
Wow.
Yeah. So right, a long path,
Yeah.
but yeah, we
It's
each have
fun.
our own.
It's funny
Yeah.
how, where we end up. I know even for me, this is not where I thought I was going to be, and not where certainly not where my parents, everyone's like, you're a psychologist. We thought you were going to be a lawyer or a cop or, like all these other things. And at one point I was going to LA to be an actress. Right. So our paths go in all sorts of different ways. So it's kind of interesting that way. And I think that would be a whole other fantastic discussion
Absolutely.
to have as
Yeah.
well, right? But bringing it back, the focus for today, I really wanted to talk about mindfulness and instilling that practice for our children and our teens.
Mm.
I do a lot of anxiety work, and a huge piece of that is mindfulness, because if we don't have mindfulness, we get carried away in
Sure,
rumination and
sure.
anxiety and all of those kinds of things. So maybe you can start us just talking about the importance of mindfulness, and we'll get
Uh-huh.
into how do we start that practice, but from your perspective, that importance of mindfulness and teaching our kids early.
Sure, sure. So, I came into teaching mindfulness after I was teaching adults. So the adults that would attend my workshops and my programs, they would come to me and say, Claudio, I love the practice, but I want to teach my children this practice, but they will not listen to me.
Yeah.
Can you come and teach my kiddos about mindfulness? And I just started, creating a loose curriculum around that, trying to adapt some of these teachings of mindfulness for adults, trying to, adapt that to children and various ages of children as well. Teens are going to respond very different than 6 to 9 year olds, than the 10 to 13-year-olds and so forth. So I guess that the heart of this practice of mindfulness, it's the same reason that adults practice. I want to say it's the same reason that children should practice. The cornerstone of all mindfulness is self-awareness. It's just knowing what is happening as it's happening, um, on the inside, right? And on the outside, with certain attitudes of like curiosity and non-judgment and compassion. So just by breaking down that definition of knowing what's happening as it's happening on the inside, like on the inside is really important for children. So how is it that they can begin to learn a language that a lot of stuff is happening on the inside? Like thoughts are happening on the inside, emotions are happening on the inside, body sensations are happening on the inside, wishes and motivations and desires are happening on the inside.
Mhm.
So it's this process of first and foremost um, guiding them to something that they are already experiencing in their lives, which is the same thing that we all experience in our lives, these thoughts, these emotions, these body sensations, and then transferring that also, or I should say, incorporating that also into what is happening on the outside. So we have to like this embodied presence of ours, right? And then it doesn't end there though, because we are relational human beings.
Mhm.
So how is it that we can incorporate others into our practice? And that's where like the whole relationship skills and nurturing friendships and being kind to one another, being a kind listener and a kind speaker, that's really important for that.
Mhm.
And especially with kiddos, because they deem their relationships, so it's like it's really important to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's so many pieces here. So, and I want to, I mean, we could go down so many different
Mhm.
avenues just based on what you said. And I think that you raise an important point about what's happening inside, because so many kids, especially when we're looking at anxiety, that interoceptive understanding, what's happening in my body, so many kids have such a hard time with that. They're so detached. They're like, I don't know, just
Mm,
my chest hurts, but they can't describe it. And it's their whole body. And it's, they can't really just sit with it. And I think we've created this society, if it's just I want it to go away, make it go away,
mm,
make it go away, make it go away. But by pushing away, we're actually just making it stronger and
mm,
worse. So just looking at this concept of mindfulness, and you said, every age has a different need. So
mm.
depending on the need, how would we introduce this concept of mindfulness for where they're
So,
at?
so for example, right now I'm on on Saturday, I just taught week 2 of a 5-week workshop. And going back to week 1, the 5-week workshop, I have 69-year-olds and 10 to 13-year-olds. So I have two distinct groups, right? And on the 69-year-olds, so the first thing that I asked them is like, what do you think mindfulness is? Like, what do some kiddos have heard about it. Um, if they haven't heard of mindfulness, I'm like, well, have you heard of meditation? And it's unbelievable what they already know. They use words such as calm and focus, um, or like a monk, like that's kind of like the imagery that kiddos will have at that age. So it's first about asking them, which I think that's really important. One thing that I try to do with children that I work with is I try to tap into the wisdom that they already contain within themselves that they may not know about it. So it's kind of like the Socratic method in that regard, just trying to ask the right questions.
Mhm.
So that's really I think that's perhaps, really reflecting on this right now. I think that's why I think I really love working with children, because you have to be very nimble about asking questions
Yeah.
and redirecting. So with the 69-year-olds, everyone knows like uh what are they like Superman and their what are they called? Action heroes. My
Action
goodness.
heroes. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
So everyone knows superheroes. Every kid knows superheroes. So I asked them, "Hey, what's a superhero that you know?" And everyone starts going around. I love the Flash. I love um, Superman. I love Iron Man. Whatever. And then I asked, "What superpowers do they have?" And so you engage the kiddos in dialogue, and then I say, "Okay, well, I'm going to teach you about a superpower that we all have, and that's the superpower of mindfulness." And in mindfulness, our superpowers is our ability to pay attention to our senses. And how many senses do we have? And the kiddos go, oh, smell and seeing and tasting and hearing and touching. Like, wow, that's amazing. So what if we had the power or the ability to really pay attention with our senses and to pay attention with with certain attitude, kindness and patience. And I kind of tend to choose one attitude and allow that attitude to be carried on throughout the workshop for that particular day. So on week one, it's patience, right? Because I want them to practice that as well as I'm teaching them. So it's a little bit of self-motivation there, but
Yeah.
self-interest there. But I'm like, okay. So now I incorporate little exercises that will allow them to pay attention to each of the senses in isolation. So one at a time. So awareness of hearing. I have my meditation bell and I ring my meditation bells and I say, just listen. Listen to the beginning, listen to the middle, listen to the end. And then that's awareness of hearing. And then with smell, like I have lavender uh, oil, essential oil,
Yeah.
and I put that on a feather and I run the feather across their nose in awareness of smell. And then awareness of touch. I give them like each an individual object that I want them to close their eyes, put out their hand and just feel the object. So just like, just isolating the senses and having them, and I kind of make a game out of it, like turn on hearing superpower of listening, or turn on superpower of taste. With taste, I bring in like a little chocolate, a little Kisses chocolate, and that's where I say now we can practice with all the senses. Because with mindful eating, you can do the whole thing. All five senses are engaged. And then I introduce a sixth sense with mindfulness. And I said in mindfulness, we have a sixth sense, and that's called thinking, consciousness. So right there and then, creating like this pretty like useful, and I don't think anybody that teaches mindfulness would say, no, that's not mindfulness.
Right.
Right. And it's practical and it's evidence-based and it's the foundation to mindfulness for children and for adults.
Yeah. And those are skills that they can start bringing just into their awareness every single day. Like you said, it's practical. And I think that a lot of people mix up meditation. I remember trying to teach mindfulness to my girls, but it was sitting, like I've got a video of them. The one is maybe 18 months. So the other one's maybe just turning 4. And they're sitting there, they're hands on their knees going, and then you see the little one just fall over. And then the other one starts kicking and now they're playing feetsies, but mom's got her eyes closed. So we got to be quiet, but I was filming them. And they're so quiet, right? But they're just like rolling around. But it's those moments. And I think that that's the one thing, how do we bring our attention back to this moment, this specific time, and whether I'm holding you, whether I'm eating a chocolate. I eat chocolate every day after dinner, but it's only one piece. And people are like my girls will just shove it in their mouth. They're like, how can you eat just one piece of chocolate? And I'm like, well, it's that I only need that much because it's so filling, emotionally and just senses when you take that time, right? You slow it down moment by moment.
I have to say that out of all the exercises, so there's some magic with the mindfulness bell, just because I could have a room filled with like energy and the kiddos are running around talking, blah, blah. And then the moment that I ring that bell, I've seen it, they all just quiet and they know that it's time to do something. So that's really cool. But out of all the little practices or exercises or meditations, formal or informal, that you can do, the mindful eating is awesome. I worked with children with autism, and that was one of the the moms were like, the mindful eating, like he loves to practice, they love to practice that at home.
Right.
So, with teaching the kiddos at the end, like I always leave 10 minutes at the end of class to speak with the parents. Sometimes the parents are in the classroom, sometimes they're not. But at the end of the class, I want to like review what we covered and why we covered it. And then I want to like, hey, the essential attitude that we practiced this week was patience. Why don't you work with your child and allow that to be the theme for the week? Or maybe it's curiosity,
Mhm.
or maybe it's trust, or maybe it's kindness. And whatever it is, you provide and I know homework is a dirty word, but you provide that homework to the kid, to the parents, and you allow them, you empower them now. Hey, you practice with your kiddos.
Mhm. And do you give them, I love that, working on this sort of the attitudes that we need to sort of develop to help our kids grow each of these. Do you give any prescriptive, anything like this is some ideas on how you can practice patience, for example, or do you just leave it up
Oh,
to them and hope
I,
for the
I,
best?
yeah, I leave it, I try not to be too prescriptive
Yeah.
because the moment that what I have found is the moment that you are too prescriptive, the moment that the listener doesn't follow the prescription, they think that they failed.
Right.
So I'm like, I'd say really simply, what's a way that you can practice patience with your kiddo? And you know, like for example, this week 2 was on Saturday. The parents came back on week 2 at the beginning. They were like, "Oh, we practice patience with And I said, "Did you practice?" And I asked the parents, I'm like, "Did you have a chance to practice patience yourself?" And the parents just look at me. They're like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." So it's like, right? So the parents become the vehicle. It's kind of like they become the mirror. It's an opportunity to reflect what patience looks like.
Mhm.
It's an opportunity to reflect what kindness looks like. And it's also like a great like area to explore in real time with your child and have it could be a 30-second conversation, a minute conversation when you pick them up from school, hey, what's one kind thing that you saw or heard or did?
Yeah.
Something, hey, so
Well, I think that that's where I was thinking, just having those conversations. And if we were going to use patience, for example, I think, and this is something that I do in all of my work, especially when I'm working on behaviors, parents bringing in this behavioral kid. And I talk about the emotional brain or anxiety or whatever. It's not the kid, it's all of us. We all have an emotional brain. And I talk about it as Loki. So I do draw from superheroes, he's can be self-serving, but it's about being awareness so that the emotional brain doesn't take over and try to trick us. But having this conversation, because patience for you, kiddo, we're going to work on this together, but for you it might be some delayed gratification. I want
mhm,
my iPad now, or I want my marshmallow now. But for me, patience is in the morning when I'm trying to rush you and we're
mhm,
getting stressed out the door. So we're going to work on this, but it's not going to look the same from me to you to dad. Maybe dad's patience is on the computer, whatever it is, like there, we
sure,
all have our
yeah,
area, and how can we work on that together? And I think that that's a great conversation starter, but we can help support each other. Now we're all working on the same team
mm,
against this, henchman of demandingness or impatience, and
sure,
so how can we look
sure.
at that? I think that's
And
great.
I love that approach that you're saying, it's like it takes a village kind of mentality, right?
Hmm.
So how is it that because so many times, not so many times, but I feel like a common pattern that I've picked up on is that parents may drop off their children to mindfulness because they want their child to be more mindful, more patient, more kind, more whatever, more right, self-regulated. And I think that they're missing an opportunity when they just drop off the kiddo just for that.
Yeah.
They're missing a huge opportunity, right? Because
Yeah.
the child does not live in a vacuum.
Yeah.
The child is modeling behavior consciously or subconsciously. So how is it that as parents, we can also cultivate that self-awareness and that emotional regulation and those relationship skills and social awareness and so forth?
Yeah.
That's really, I've found that the children that respond and develop these skills are the children that have parents that are developing these skills alongside their children.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do a lot of co-regulation too. And I like working with parents first, even before I even see kids, to work on their skills and their ability to co-regulate and their awareness and all of these pieces. I think that's important. And then even looking, at the two most significant influencers in our kids' life, especially in those early elementary years, parents, number one, teachers, number two. And so this could be an
Mm,
easy classroom. Today, class, or this week, we are going to be working on patience. And so what are some ways as a classroom and as individuals we can be working on this? So just taking that, because I know I do have a lot of teachers who listen to this podcast as well, a class-wide sort of approach to this. So I think that there's so many different things that we could do there. Is there anything, so for the younger kids, some of those really practical, sort of tactile, working on the senses, which I suspect is the same. I mean, I do very similar things with my older kids, but are there
mhm.
any other additional considerations for the older kids?
Whoa. The older kids are so it's funny because like on one hand, the 6 to 9 year olds, they're full of energy. So you have to be able to um, patiently work with that energy and channel it in ways that is conducive to themselves and conducive to the class.
Mhm.
So that's really, it's challenging, but it's beautiful work. Like I love it because you're not, I'm saying, I haven't had a group of 6 to 9 year olds that are still and quiet and don't want to participate,
Right. Yeah. No.
right?
Yeah.
The tent, and this is where like when you get into the teens, there is a little more awkwardness, feeling of I don't want to be here. Why am I here? A lot of shyness and loneliness.
Mm.
So it's a different vibe, I find, with this group that I have of 10 to 13. They're older. They're like old 10 to 13 year olds, right? Because sometimes they're young 10 to 13
Yeah.
year olds,
Yeah.
and so I find myself just sitting with them and talking about these principles of mindfulness, but doing so in a way that I can get their buy-in, and I whatever they say, whether whether it's um, whether it adds to the class or whether it's disruptive. I have found that in that particular age group, they're waiting for me to discipline them or they're waiting for me to get upset.
Mm.
And that's like the last thing that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to be present with them and allow every opportunity, every eye roll, every I don't want to be here to be an opportunity of like, oh, because I heard that from one of the students, like, I don't, and I'm like, well, you don't have to be here. You can leave if you want. It's like, no, I can't because then my dad's going to get upset. And I'm like, and here we are in a group of about 6 other people, right? And I'm like, hey, I turn it over to the classroom, to the kiddos. I'm like, hey, have you ever been in a situation like this where like you're there, but you don't want to be there? And how does that feel? It just allow that bubbling up of this like negative emotion of aversion to be an opportunity to study it, to be with
Mhm.
it, and to reflect and to allow the other children to be like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, and I'm trying to empathize, connect with the child. Man, it must be really hard to be here because you know that, if you don't have, if you leave, what do you think is going to happen? There's going to be consequences with your father. So my invitation is always, well, what can we do in this moment? And just this little moment, what can we do to just alleviate or to reduce this angst or this aversion or this hate, whatever it is that's bubbling up? And maybe it's like your peer saying, hey, I understand. Like, I've been there. I understand what you're feeling. Maybe it's just an opportunity for that.
And I love that because, I mean, there's a couple of things there. One is just being able to sit with it. And I think that shows, I mean, just the beauty of your ability as a clinician, because sometimes our ego gets in the way and it's,
Mm,
I'm going to make this fun. I got to make it more inviting. And about, we try to change things but then we're sending the message, see, this is a bad feeling, right? And so we got to get
yeah.
rid of that. So being able to sit, there are no good or bad feelings. This is telling us something important, and it might be uncomfortable. It might be uncomfortable for me because I'm the one teaching the class, right? But as
Yeah.
being able to sit there with that, and I think that that's such an amazing lesson in and of itself, and something that I try to teach parents too when our kids come to us and say, you don't love me, you love sibling more, or I have no friends, and we want to swoop in. No, 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 let me tell you all the reasons why I love you, and let me tell you all we try to make it, fix it,
Yeah.
and they never have that opportunity to sit with it and be with it. But that's where coping is, and that's where mindfulness is, that's where life is.
Yeah. That's, I love what you say there. That's where coping is, right? That's where life is. Because if there's one thing that you can teach in that moment to that child that's having that really difficult experience of not wanting to be in class, is like, it's like it's like reducing. Can you do anything to reduce the suffering? And sometimes that anything to reduce the suffering is just sitting, breathing, looking around, being with each other, and allowing, it's the Marines have like this term, embrace the suck,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like this is, as children, as teenagers, especially, like they're starting to sense like, I want us, I want independence, but I don't have the independence. I still have a mom and dad. So that's profound right there.
Hmm.
Because if you can teach that child to be there present with the sock and not do anything, not disrupt class or not hate themselves or hate their parent in that moment, just for however brief that moment is, that's the start. That's the seed. That's the seed that you're planting. That's the mindfulness seed right there.
Yeah.
And as a clinician or as a teacher, you want that seed to fruit, but you ain't going to see that fruit. And you, as a parent, as a teacher, as a clinician, must be able to accept that a seed is not the same as the fruit.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah.
So,
And we get in the way, of that
oh,
sometimes. And I think that that's the
that's
piece that
the
I'm always we got to let our kids embrace the suck, because otherwise, as adults, that's why we've got so many quick fixes. Is the minute I've got a headache, I'm going to take an Advil. And the minute, something doesn't go my way, I have a stressful day, I get a carton of ice cream and watch Netflix. And so we never really learn how to, because life is full of suck, but it's also full of amazing little
yeah,
moments that pass us by when we're not being mindful.
yeah, yeah. And that we take the passing by so casually.
Yeah.
Like we just, and we do this as adults, but as children, it's very easy to see it in our kids as well, right? Because it's unbelievable how easy it is to pick up when somebody's not paying attention to you,
Hmm.
right? But it's much more difficult for you to become self-aware in the moment that you're not paying attention to somebody else.
Right.
So this ability to notice what's happening on the inside and on the outside is essential to this practice. One of the things that I did with the 10 to 13-year-olds was like 4 exercises with them. It's all about like interpersonal communication. So like sitting in partners, they face each other. And the first exercise that I did was, okay, there's partner A and partner B. Partner A describes their ideal vacation to partner B, and they do so just for 30 seconds. And partner B listens intently, because after 30 seconds, you're going to be asked to repeat verbatim, to the best of your ability, what partner A said. So they do that. They go back and forth, right? One time. And then on the second exercise is, okay, partner A, now you get to describe your favorite ice cream. Tell your partner B all about your favorite ice cream. But partner B, this time, you're not going to be listening intently. I want you to ignore your partner. And you can do anything you want, but you just can't leave the chair.
Right.
And I do that for 30 seconds. And then we process like, what did that feel like in the first instant? What did it feel like to like talk knowing that this person is listening to you? Right? What kind of like verbal and nonverbal cues were you giving? What does it look like to actually be paying attention? Like there's a leaning in, there's a forward, there's eye contact, right? Like you're there with the person. And then in the second exercise, like I asked right away, is this familiar to anybody? And then everyone's like, everybody, adults, children, they all raise their hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is familiar. I know what it feels like to be ignored. Right?
Yeah.
So like, how did that feel? How did it feel to talk and share like your favorite ice cream flavor, knowing that your partner is not paying attention one bit? And you see different like coping mechanisms that like the kiddos will do to try to get like they talk louder, or some of them will just like kind of like just like shrink.
Yeah.
Right? Like they know that they're not being listened. They know they're not being heard.
Yeah.
And then like, how did it feel to like intentionally ignore somebody?
Yeah.
So like the core, right? It's like that's I think for teens, that's really cool.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of teachings around that.
And the experiential piece is so important, because we can
Yeah.
talk about it, and they know it, but to
I know.
experience it and be in the moment with it, that's a totally different experience.
Yeah. The third exercise is like same partners. Now I ask, okay, just check in, no talking, no verbal or nonverbal communication. Just check in with each other from time to time, just by looking at each other. Just that. Just bring awareness to your partner every now and then. You don't have to stare at their face, but just check in with them. Okay, that's the third exercise. And the fourth exercise is, okay, I want you to do the same, but this time I'm going to be reciting certain phrases. And all that I want you to do is just keep checking in with your partner, with your eyes, and then just listen to what I say. And if the words that I say generate a feeling, that's okay. Just continue looking and checking in with your partner. And then I utter certain phrases, loving kindness phrases. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. And just like seeing what it would be like for a child to be sitting across another child that they just, in this workshop, they just met them and they're connecting face to face, and like one is sending kind wishes to the other and exploring that. So with teens, I think that that's really precious territory to explore
Absolutely.
because they want that connection more than anything.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's and lots of practical ideas that people can implement. I used to teach like graduate students for counseling, and one of the activities when in the working alliance class, I would have them stare. You can't break eye contact, and I didn't say
Yeah.
how long, and sometimes I'd go for 10 minutes, and you can just see the awkwardness, but it's being able to sit with that silence because we want to fill in the gaps. And so being able to sit and what's coming up for you, and some people burst out laughing, some people cry, some it's emotions all over. So much comes up, and I think that we miss out because we just want to swoop in, right, and take away that awkwardness. So I think that that's very valuable. You're nicer in that they can look away, but I think that that's something that our teens especially need to embrace.
I think with the teens, like I allow them to break eye contact, because I think it's really hard for them.
So hard for
With
anybody.
adults, absolutely. With adults, like you, I'm saying this is usually week 7 of the 8-week program when I teach this to adults. And yeah, it's like 7-minute facial awareness. It's called a facial awareness meditation. And that's where you're just there present. The object of the meditation is your partner's face.
Mm.
And then the 4th exercise is doing that, but with me reciting certain loving kindness phrases.
Right.
But in that, I'm saying for adults, I've had couples do this. I've had friends do this. I've had strangers do this.
Yeah.
And tears will come down.
Yeah.
They will flow.
Because it's not very often that we're just with somebody, right? Like that somebody's wholly listening, wholly just being with us. Because there's always something on the go. We've got something else, they're multitasking. Like we just don't have that experience. And I think that there's this release, this emotional release when we're just there with another human being.
And that is exactly what your children want from the parents. Yeah. And I understand that it's impossible for the parent to be able to offer that every single moment. I understand that. But yet I think that we are too flippant about the moments that we don't share that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are like, oh, I just don't have the time. Yeah. I just don't know, not now.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But it's just taking those moments as you can. I think that that's definitely something that we can all focus on. So, man, I know we could talk for hours and hours. I should probably wrap this up because people do have things that they need to do. Is there any last words of wisdom before we wrap up the episode for today?
I'm gonna, Lance, who's the CEO of the Austin Mindfulness Center, he's my co-host on the podcast. He loves John Kabat-Zinn. I love John Kabat-Zinn as well because he's kind of like, I call him the godfather of mindfulness because everyone has to kiss his ring,
Yeah.
So that's just, I know that JKZ doesn't have that, but there is one quote, and it's from his documentary that Bill Moyers did on him, Healing in the Mind. And it's something like along the lines of like, these little moments, they aren't so little, they're your life. Like just like that right there. Mm-hmm. These moments, these little moments, they ain't so little, they're your life.
I love it. It's so true because we focus on the big and I think we've talked about this before previously, just, we want Disneyland, we want the big experience, but it's not Disneyland. It's the little moments on the plane or, sitting on the park bench over here. Like, it's just those little moments. It's not always big Disneyland, fun, glamorous, so I love that.
And I ask the parents, well, I would ask anybody, like, reflect upon your own life. What are the moments that you remember? Yeah. They are the little moments. It's truly unbelievable.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, sure, there's some big moments in there too, but they're just like these little moments of care, of love, of connection. So
Yeah. Love it. That's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I know I definitely appreciate your wisdom and how we can break this down and introduce mindfulness to kids.
absolutely. And if anybody always curious about more mindfulness off the cushion, that's the podcast that we produce at the Austin Mindfulness Center. I have to do that shameless plug.
No, it's perfect. And I will have your contact and I'll put the podcast in the show notes as well. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you so much.